One of the biggest mistakes you could make when you buy a used car is not doing all of the services that are time-based or mileage-based. Now obviously, if the previous owner has record of them doing those services in a timely manner, then you don't have to do those services. But the reason you're going to want to do those services is it gives you not only peace of mind, but it makes sure that your car is in a well-balanced order. What I mean by that is some fluids, when they go bad, can cause damage to your vehicle. And what I mean by that, for example, is brake fluid. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs water from the air and gets into the brake fluid, and that decreases brake performance, as well as it can cause rust issues in your brake lines and whatnot. That's just one of many examples, but now let's look at the car that we'll be working on today. This is a beautiful 2013 Acura TL with the super handling all-wheel drive, and most importantly, it has a 6-speed manual. Now, this vehicle may have maintenance items that are not applicable to you, but it's good to know that these maintenance items exist just in case you go out and buy a car and they do have these. Okay guys, here are all of the tools that I used in this video. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to get the exact same tools that I used because some of them aren't reasonable for some of you guys to buy. Like for example, this ratchet. This ratchet was 200 bucks, right? That's not reasonable for a lot of DIYers. It is for a professional mechanic though. And here's kind of what I'm saying. So just these two items, my ratchet and my flashlight, can buy you this whole entire set. It comes with 1/4 inch, 3/8 and 1/2 inch equipment, like a bunch of various sockets, extensions, bunch of wrenches, bunch of Allen keys, spark plug sockets, you name it. This thing will pretty much have most of the things you need. And this is DeWalt branded, so it's not like they're the nicest set of tools, but they'll definitely get you by for a while. I still use them day to day at work, and you know, sometimes they're necessary. But yeah, so like I said, you don't need my exact tools. You can find cheaper alternatives that will definitely get the job done. It's just, I sometimes need nicer tools because I'm beating the crap out of my tools every day. There will also be a list of the tools in the description, just so you guys know exactly what I'm using. But, you know, like I said, you can find different variants of these tools and get the job done exactly the same. All right, here's everything that is either time-based or mileage-based that we're doing on the car today. We got oil and filter, we got brake fluid, which is for the brakes and the clutch, just in case you weren't aware. We have manual transmission fluid, because the car is manual transmission. We have dual pump fluid 2, which is gonna be for the rear differential. We have Hypod gear oil. Let me get a closer shot so you guys can see that. That is for the front transfer assembly. We're gonna be doing coolant. We're gonna be doing the timing belt, and alongside that, we're gonna be doing the water pump, as well as the timing belt tensioner. Now, this isn't everything that we'll be doing, because we have some hood struts and a serpentine belt as well, and we have a couple other things, but let's get started. One other thing I forgot to mention is try and stick with what your manufacturer recommends. You know, they're the ones that designed the car, built the car. For the most part, they know what's best for it. Okay, so first thing we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna jack up the car and make it level on jack stands. The level part is important. I'll show you why when we get to that portion of the video. Another note I wanted to make is you don't need a jack as nice as mine. You could probably buy like an O'Reilly's jack or something and still do the same thing. I just wanted to upgrade, and this one's a lot nicer than the ones I used to use. Alright guys, once you get the car jacked up, you're going to want to put your jack stands on the pinch welds. That was also a very tight squeeze. I thought I'd park back a little further, so make sure to take note where you're parking. The reason I did the front of the car first is because the handbrake's up, so it's holding the rear wheels in place. But now that the front is on jack stands, we should be able to jack up the rear, try to make it the exact same height on the jack stands, and then we should be good to start. All right guys, now that we got the car all jacked up, you're going to want to jounce the car. I don't care if you've worked on cars for 20, 30 years. Jounce the car before you get under the car. And what I mean by that is, give the car a good shake. Right? It's gonna fall. I gave it a pretty good shake. It's clearly not gonna fall. I put the jack stands in its proper places, right in the center of the jack stand, so we should be good to go. All right guys, we are gonna start with the rear differential first. So what you're gonna wanna do is, you're gonna wanna find the drain plug. It has just like a 3/8 fitting. You can put a 3/8 ratchet on there. And then obviously have some sort of drain bucket underneath so you can catch all the fluid. Okay. Okay, break it loose. Pull your drain pan in the way. And then let it slowly start draining out so that it doesn't come flying out. I also don't have the best drain bucket for this as it's filling up fairly quickly. Now I don't advise that you pull the fill plug before the drain plug because then it's just going to come flying out. But as you can see, the fluid doesn't look great. It might look better on camera, but in person it's not the best. And then on the drain plug you have this little magnet. Just make sure to wipe that off before putting it back in. Another thing you're going to want to do is make sure you get the old washer off. I don't know if you guys were able to see that fall, but you really don't want to double washer it. And then you're going to want to make sure to put a new one on. Just slide that on. And this is an 18mm washer. Then once it's done draining, just put the drain plug back in, wipe up the excess oil, and then grab your ratchet and tighten it up. So obviously it doesn't need to be crazy tight, but I like to snug it up a good bit because I really don't want that drain plug popping out. Now there's the drain plug and the fill plug is right above it. And as you can see, the differential says DPSF. That's how you know what fluid it takes. But we're gonna take that drain plug out and then fill it up with some fluid. That one was really on there for some reason, which is okay. Get it off, replace the washer. And for the fill plug, it's a 20mm washer. All right guys, I got the bottle of the differential fluid. I just cut a hole in the top, almost like a little Chinese finger trap. I'll show you that guys later. And bought a hand pump. Let's see if it works. Yep, there it goes. Perfect. And then we'll just stick the other end up top, put it into the differential, and start pumping away. This is one of the slower pumps I've used, but I got this one from Harbor Freight for like $7. So for $7, you can't really complain too much. We've pumped in approximately 2 quarts. This rear diff should take around 2.2 or so. So let's switch this out and get the rest pumped in. Okay guys, and once you get it full, it will start dripping out like that, like so. This is the reason why you wanted the vehicle to be completely level, because the way this works is you have a drain plug, you have a fill plug. Once you drain it, you put that back in, you open the fill plug, you fill it up, and the bottom of the fill plug hole is the level of the differential. So that's why we needed it level. Once it stops having a constant pour, put your fill plug back in, spray it with some brake clean, and then give it a good wipe. And then tighten up the fill plug, and that's how you perform a rear differential service. The next thing we're gonna tackle is the transfer assembly, which is right there, where my light is absolutely blinding it. As you can see, there's a drain plug, and then there is a fill plug. It's the exact same concept as the rear differential, so I'm not gonna film the whole thing, but you're going to need an extension, probably like a 3-inch extension for specifically that one, and it makes this one a little easier. Once you get it all drained, you can add the fluid. I have a bottle that has a little rubber hose on it that I just squeeze the bottle into there. Just because if you use a hand pump, this liquid is so thick, it's a little, like, it just takes so long because it's so thick. So let's get on with it.
and that's it. It's only about like half a quart. It's not much. And of course, remember to put the fill plug back in with the new washer on both the fill and the drain. Make sure they're tight. Hit it with some brake clean, and that's how you service a transfer assembly. Okay, so next up, we're gonna try and tackle this transmission. So if we go underneath some more, you can see right there, let me get my finger there, boop, right here. That is the drain plug for your transmission. So we're gonna try and tackle that. And to get to that, it looks like we have to take that little plastic clip off where my shadow is touching. And then maybe we can bend this plastic out of the way in order to get that. There's another clip right here that I have to remove just to make it a little easier. Okay, that should be loose enough. Let's loosen that plug. Now that we got our drain bucket underneath, let's loosen this up and hope we don't create a giant mess. It's not going to drain too good, but thankfully this should only have a couple quarts. Okay, now we'll just let this sit here and fully drain out.
While we wait for that to drain, let's figure out these hood struts. I assume they can't be too bad, but if I'm being honest, I've never done them. Okay. Okay guys, now that I got that on, so basically how it works is, the way you replace these is you can get a knife and go right under this collar and then you pry it out. See how that's coming out? And then as you're prying it out, you can then pull it off its little ball joint, and same thing on the other side. And then for the new ones, you just push it on and then it clips in with those clips. So fairly easy. We're gonna tighten up that drain plug here in a bit, but I want to try and show you something. So you see how there's two bolts? There's the one on the bottom and one on the top. The one on top is the level check plug. So the capacity is 2.2 quarts. So you can either leave that alone and put 2.2 quarts in, or you can just pull the bolt and wait for it to drain out. I'm personally gonna pull the bolt and wait for it to drain out, just because I feel like that's the right thing to do. But I'll get the drain plug on here shortly and get that out. Also, just for reference for where that is, because I don't even know I'm gonna film this or be able to, that's where the drain plug is. If you go around, that's the bottom bolt right here. Right there. So it's right above this. Now to find the fill plug, we're gonna have to get into the engine bay. As you can see, my ratchet goes all the way down to it, all the way down there. That's your fill plug. I'm assuming they wanted you to take off the intake to give you a little more wiggle room, but I think with 2 extensions I should be able to get it. So I'm gonna try to get it, and I'll be back when it's ready to pour. Okay, I was able to get it. I had to switch out my extension setup. I placed this one directly into the fill plug because if I didn't, it wouldn't have lined up right, and then I had another extension so I can get a little more wiggle with the long one, and I was able to get it that way. Now, I have this filter contraption. I hope you have a long filter. I thought I had a long filter, so I'm really glad I bought these ones, but it should work pretty good. So let's fill it up. I also don't know if I showed it off, but here's that fill plug bolt. I'm really hoping that when I fill it, it doesn't just immediately come out of there, but I guess we'll find out. Alright guys, as you can see, it is dripping from that little check plug. So now we're going to put that bolt back in, because we have just a very steady drip, and then we're going to put the fill plug back on. And there we go guys, we got the manual transmission done. Now that that's done, let's get to changing the oil. Okay, first step, you're going to want to find your oil cap, which on this engine is right there. And you're going to want to take it off. By doing this, the oil can flow out faster if you have the opportunity to allow that to happen, which I'll get to what I mean by that here in a little bit. Personally, I'm gonna leave mine on because I want it to flow out slowly so that I don't make a large mess while going into my bucket. Now keep in mind, if you pull the drain plug all the way out and you have the cap on, it's still gonna come out pretty aggressively, but it's not gonna go nearly as far as if you have the cap off. Okay, we are back underneath. If you look at your oil pan, on this car in particular, it says engine oil right there, and then you have your drain plug right there. This vehicle in particular has a 17mm drain plug, and keep in mind there is no standard size.
Then when you get under here, you're gonna wanna put the closed end on there. Less likely to strip it. That one was pretty tight on there, but now this one I still can't spin by hand. Usually you should be able to. Okay, good. Now I can spin it by hand. Put your drain bucket underneath and start spinning it out. I probably should have wore a glove, but basically I'm just blocking the flow a little bit with the drain plug so that it doesn't just come flying out, but I'm still draining it at a decent rate. Okay, I drained enough that I feel comfortable just letting it go. So now we just wait. Just wanted to show you guys this really quick. The washer on the drain plug has been used many times, which means it expanded and now it won't come off the drain plug. So pretty much how you can do this is you can grab some pliers. You know, these are just some hyperstiff pliers, nothing special. And then use your wrench while holding it and just spin it off. Usually that works. Sometimes you can cut it off, sometimes you can just throw the drain plug on the ground and it'll come off, but in this case it was definitely a pliers and wrench kind of situation. Okay guys, there's the oil filter. There's the drain bucket where we were just draining the oil. Now it looks like Acura actually made the design pretty nice and they left a hole there. I know on Hondas they usually don't like to do that for you. What you can do to mitigate the oil from getting onto the subframe there is using like a license plate or something, but I'm thinking I can maybe just loosen this oil filter and it'll go right through the hole and I won't have to deal with too crazy of a mess. So let's give it a shot. Okay, let me see if I can just get it by hand through here. No, that thing is really on there, so we're gonna have to get some pliers. So here are the ones that I use. They're fairly simple. I think I picked them up for like 20 bucks. But let's get these on there. Holy hell. I had to set you guys down for that. Whoever put that on there really did not want anyone getting that off. But if we spin it, should start dripping some oil. And perfect. It goes right through. We made a little mess as you can see, but I mean, we can just spray that off with some brake clean, that's no big deal. Now that it's for the most part done dripping, what we can do is we can unscrew it the rest of the way. Usually more oil falls out, it just kind of depends on the filter from what I've noticed. There we go. Then let's pour the rest out through the hole. Throw the filter into the bucket. Okay, now we're going to want to grab our new filter and we're going to want to oil up this O-ring. Another thing I wanted to mention about Honda filters is, if you look at the top there, notice how the gasket sits slightly above this little rim here. They designed it so that when you tighten it, it stops on this rim and creates a perfect seal with this O-ring. The reason that one on there was so tight was because it was one where it's like 1/4 inch O-ring. And someone just went, you know, ridiculously tight with it. But on these ones, you can't really do that. Okay, so we're gonna wanna open our bottle, poke a little hole in it, and then rip off all of the foil. And we're just gonna dip our finger in there. Don't need too much. And there we go. Now we got that O-ring all oiled up. Okay, now we're gonna wanna grab the new filter and thread it on. There we go. Just go as tight as you can with your hand and you should be good. I'll put the torque spec up just in case one of you guys want to torque it down. Okay, now we're gonna want to clean this off. I'm just gonna spray a little brake clean. Grab your drain plug with a new washer on there. Wipe up your mess. Not ideal to use paper towels, by the way. And then spin it all the way in by hand. And move your bucket out of the way. And then tighten it up pretty good.
Well guys, I messed up. And I'm showing you this just to show you that it's a possibility and to be careful yourself. I looked it up on Google and it said it took 0.20, so I bought 0.20, but the cap says 520, and I did some deeper research and the two-wheel drive models take 0.20, the all-wheel drive models take 520. So unfortunately I'm gonna have to wait until the morning to add the oil, but I guess I'll show you guys how to do it. I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory. You open up your oil cap, you put your funnel in, and then you pour. Yeah, this car in specific takes 4.5 quarts, and then you would be done with your oil change. Okay, now it's time to move on to the brake and clutch fluid. So on this car, you're gonna wanna take this panel off. I already had it off. I promise it's not that easy. And then on this car, you have a brake fluid reservoir and then a clutch fluid reservoir. Some cars mix the two together and it's only the brake fluid reservoir. I'm not too sure why they combine it, if I'm being honest, but I feel like it's a safety measure to a degree, because if you lose your brakes, then you lose your clutch, preventing you from driving it. You can still drive it, there's ways, but it would be a lot harder than just normal operation. Now the way you're gonna wanna check your fluid, let's brighten up the light here, is you want to open the cap and you want to look in there. And as we can see, it's green. Now, I don't know why it's green. It's not dirty though. So I'm assuming this might be some special kind of fluid or some brake fluid additive, but I do not want that in there. I have no idea what's in there, and they didn't bother with the clutch because as you can see, the clutch fluid actually looks pretty clear from here, but we'll see how it looks when we open it. So what we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna suck out the fluid from the reservoir. So let's get started on that. So the way I'm gonna get it out is I'm gonna use the same transfer pump that I used for the rear diff. I already cleaned out the hoses and whatnot with some brake clean. Let's see how effective this is. You're not gonna get all of it, but we got most of it. Now we're gonna want to take our Honda fluid, make sure it's sealed before you open it, and usually it's crushed like this on the bottle. When it's crushed like that, you know it's still sealed. As soon as we open it up, it's going to inflate, if you will. Okay, now that we got it opened, we're just gonna want to dump it in there and pour it in just like that. Now it's not gonna overflow because of physics, but if you understand what I just did there, I expanded the capacity of the reservoir so I don't have to keep coming back and checking it, right? And believe it or not, that small amount should be enough to bleed the whole brake system, but we'll see. I have a second one just in case. The only problem with using the Honda bottle is it's a little hard to tell. I was originally gonna pour it into this bottle because you can at least see through it, but I just figured, why make it more of a hassle? I'll just check the reservoir. Okay. Now we're gonna wanna go to the driver's front and look at the caliper. Now if we look at the caliper, we're gonna wanna look at this thing. This has a little rubber boot over it, but that is our bleeder valve, right? So we're gonna wanna get set up here. That's how we're gonna bleed the brakes. Keep in mind, there's multiple ways to bleed brakes. There's pressure bleeding, there's vacuum bleeding, there's gravity bleeding, and then I guess you could call the way that we're gonna do it pressure bleeding, since we're gonna be using the brake master cylinder to pump fluid through. But we're gonna use this little handy device. Now, you can make this at home. I just borrowed a friend's. But basically how this works is, we have clean brake fluid in the container. This part goes over that little bleeder valve I just showed you. It has a vent, and then with this all together, you can bleed brakes by yourself without vacuum or anything like that, just a simple container. If you have a container that can hold brake fluid, you have brake fluid and you have a hose running down into the brake fluid, you can do that. Because basically the idea with this is you open up the valve You get inside, you push the brake, fluid comes through here into the bottle, which fills the reservoir more with clean fluid. And then when you let off the brake, it sucks a very tiny amount of this back in, allowing you to push bubbles and whatnot through the system. Okay guys, first step, you're gonna wanna come to the valve and pull this little rubber cap off. Then we're gonna wanna put our bottle on our stand since it's not tall enough to reach. And the idea is gonna be that, right? It's hooked on, we're gonna break that loose. On these, I like using the closed end of the wrench just because it's sometimes these can be a pain, but you're gonna wanna get it on there. I just like breaking it loose a little bit. Okay, now we have our contraption set up. Let's break open that valve a little bit. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. And now, if I go in and press the pedal, and now as you guys can see, there's some green stuff in the bottle, which means it's working. I'm not a big fan of it, not even really mixing though. Like as you can see, the brake fluid I had in there sits right above the green stuff. So I don't know exactly what that was, but hopefully we can get that resolved. All right guys, as you can see, half it's clear, half of it is green. I was just doing 5 short pumps in between checking this bottle, and it seems that I have gotten all the green stuff out. And how I determined that was I kept looking, you know, went to 100, then it went to 150, and then after the 5 pumps, this only jumped up to 175, while this jumped up from 275 to 375, indicating we're getting clear fluid again. Now, 2 side notes I want to make. 1, don't push the brake pedal all the way down with the bleeder valve open. That would easily allow you to push the brake pedal to the point where you would break the master cylinder from the piston going so far that it would break the rubber seal. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. And 2, some of you may have heard that you want to start at the wheel that's furthest away from the reservoir, which in this case would be the passenger rear wheel. Honda's directions is to start at the driver's front and go in a clockwise pattern actually. I don't know how I feel with the clockwise, but personally I would just go reverse, closest to furthest, not furthest to closest. But okay, that's how you bleed your brakes. I'm gonna go around and do that to all the other wheels because it's gonna take significantly longer than this one considering all the other circuits are longer than this one. So I'll see you guys in a few. Alrighty guys, we got the brake fluid done. Now it's time to show you something that I was talking about earlier. So when we were looking at the fluid reservoir for the brakes, I had mentioned that it was green but it wasn't dirty. Okay, now we have Honda fluid in there. It's properly colored. And then if we move over here, see how much darker it is? Like even if I get the light right on there. Like you can see, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but this is really cloudy and that's what brand new Honda fluid looks like. See, I shine the light in there, it looks great. And in there it looks cloudy. So that's what I meant by it was green but it wasn't dirty. Now we can start on the clutch fluid. So first you want to find your slave cylinder. Okay, so right here, right where my finger is, that's the nipple to the slave cylinder, and that weird rib thing is the boot to the slave cylinder to keep dust out of there. So pretty much we're going to want to do the exact same thing as the brakes. We're going to want to get that container down there, which by the way, they both take brake fluid. I don't know if I mentioned that before. There's no clutch fluid, it's just brake fluid. And we're going to want to do the exact same thing. Take the bottle, put it on there, press the clutch in while keeping the reservoir topped off, and bleed it that way. So let's try and get that started. Okay, there we go. We got the little Mighty Vac container on there with the bleeder valve there, and let's see if this works. In theory it should. I added a little reservoir because it seemed to have been gravity bleeding while I was away washing my hands, but let's try it out. Yeah guys, my plan with the clutch seems to have not worked, and I don't know if it's just my plan or if it's because it was gravity bleeding faster than I was anticipating. So I think I accidentally ran the little reservoir just barely too dry. All right guys, we're back on the next night, and I wanted to let you guys know that the little bleeder bottle on the slave cylinder does work. I indeed did accidentally allow air to get into the system. That's why the clutch was not working afterwards. But just so you guys know for the future. I also don't know if I mentioned this. The bleeder valves on the calipers in the slave cylinder only need to be slightly past snugged up. You know, you don't want to snap it or make it ridiculously hard to get out later. It's not something that needs to be like 50 foot-pounds. And we also have the proper oil level, 520. Now, for those of you that don't know, if you look on the side of the bottle, it has liters and quarts. And obviously you have indicating marks telling you exactly where you're at. This is a 5-quart jug or a 4.73 liter bottle. And this engine takes 4.5 quarts. And then start pouring. That's probably it. Okay, we poured about 4.5. We won't know until we start the engine and check the dipstick. But there's one other note I wanted to add. So this oil says protects for 20,000 miles. To me, that's implying that you can do 20,000 mile oil changes, which I highly do not recommend. I know there are some manufacturers out there that recommend 20,000 mile oil changes. For example, I know Sprinter vans say to go every 20,000. Now they also hold a crap ton of oil in their engines comparatively. Like I believe their 3-liter diesel, their V6 holds something crazy like 13.5, 13.6 quarts of oil, which is about the same as a 6.7 Power Stroke. That's how much oil that holds, which, you know, will be able to absorb a lot more hydrocarbons over time and blah, 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 whatever. But I just don't think that's good. Even 10,000 mile oil changes, I wouldn't recommend that. I would personally just go by the middle service interval for a manufacturer. For example, a vehicle can say change your oil every 5,000 if you're at harsh conditions, change it every 10,000 if you have ideal conditions, so just shoot for that 7,500. And then once your car gets older, or if your car is older, sometimes even 5,000 is too much depending on how old it is and how worn out the engine is. So keep that in mind with your vehicle. Okay, now it's time to get the car off the jack stands, and at least in my personal scenario, we're going to want to do it in the reverse order, because if we put the back down first, we'll have the parking brake to be able to hold the vehicle while we get the front up, remove the jack stands, and get it down. If we start with the front first, the car could roll, and you really don't want that. That'd be a giant mess. So I'll see you guys in a few seconds. Okay, now we're going to want to start it for about 30 seconds, shut it off, and then we'll check the oil after 5 minutes. Now after we've waited a good bit, find your dipstick. It's usually orange. Wipe it off coming out. Put it back in, make sure it seats all the way. Pull it back out. That's our level. So we could still add a little more, which I'm going to do. Now, as you guys can see, it's perfect now. Another thing I should mention is if you look up your oil capacity in your owner's manual or online, let's say it's 4.5, and you check your dipstick after the oil change and it's above, but you look at the jug you bought and you for sure put 4.5 quarts in, what kind of filter did you buy? Sometimes that has a play in it. Like for example, if you don't have a quality filter on a Honda, it usually doesn't retain the oil in the filter, and it has to refill the filter with oil every single time you start it up. So when you check the dipstick, it looks like it's high, but in reality, it's the filter that's the problem. Now, I'm not saying that's all Hondas or all makes, but that's just what I've seen from my personal experience. As soon as they get a proper Honda filter on there, usually that's not the case anymore. And of course, after you got done bleeding your brakes, bleeding your clutch if you have a clutch, make sure to pump up both pedals before you put it into any sort of gear, especially in an automatic, because you may not be able to stop if for some reason something weird happened. I already pumped up the brakes, I already checked that the car moves. Everything is good on my list. Okay guys, now that we got the rest of the services done, it's time to do the coolant. And as you can see, it's another day. The reason I delayed the coolant so long is because I plan on doing the timing belt as well. So stick around for that video. Okay, so on this car specifically, we have to take off some of these covers. Right here it says engine coolant. And I believe we have to just pop it out on this side. We'll set this on the ground over here. Then it looks like to where we need to get to, we need to also pop this cover off, as well as this cover. And now this is where we want to get to. This is your radiator cap, and we're going to want to take this off. Now, there's a trick to open this when it's hot, but I don't recommend opening it while it's hot, just because it can be dangerous. So ideally you want to wait for the car to cool off, which I have done. But for those of you that are in a hurry, the car's hot, you just want to get it done, you're going to want to grab a rag. And again, I don't recommend doing this. You're going to want to apply pressure down, twist it off, and then lift one side of the lid slowly. Now the reason you don't want to take it off quickly is the cooling system's under pressure. And if you open it quickly, all the pressure is just gonna go up, out, all over you. You're gonna have very hot, very sticky coolant on you. Probably get a bunch of burns on yourself if it's hot enough, which it most likely will. The reason the cooling system is under pressure is because the more pressure the liquid's under, the higher the boiling temperature goes. But as soon as you open it up, it starts boiling, it starts flying out, it can be a mess. So that's the reason you want to open it slowly, relieve the pressure slowly, and then you should be okay. And now that we got that done, we're gonna want to go underneath the vehicle and find the drain plug, or some people call it petcock. So if we go underneath, on this car specifically, it's right here. It's this little wing nut looking thing, wing bolt, whatever you want to call it. And it has a very nice opening. Now if you look, there's two parts to this. There's the actual white part right here, and then there's this little nipple underneath right there, right next to my finger. And the idea behind that is you want to take out that little bolt just enough that it'll drain out of the little nipple. I don't recommend taking the bolt all the way out. You'll get the quickest drain, believe me, but it draining out of the nipple already creates a big enough of a mess. And coolant is just kind of hard to wipe up. It takes a little more effort than that. If you guys spill any, which you probably will, you'll understand what I mean. It's like 3 times the amount of wipes or towels or whatever you're using as compared to water. Okay guys, we got our drain bucket under there. We got a few pig mats around just in case it decides to spill over or splash everywhere. Then you're gonna want to reach your hand up here, twist it. Sometimes you'll need pliers on this. In this case I didn't need to. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna keep turning it slightly until it starts dripping out. You can make it drain out faster than this, but this is the ideal speed I want because it's not gonna splash too much. I can direct it right into the area that it drains. And now we'll be back in like 20 minutes. All right guys, we're back. It's all drained out. Now you just have to tighten up that drain plug again. Hand tight is just fine. And then I'll show you guys the next step. Now you could just try to pour coolant into the radiator and deal with all that trouble. Or you can buy one of these. This makes the job 10 times easier, right? You have this little plunger, you pull it out, right? And this just goes directly onto the radiator cap. Take this plunger out, and then start pouring coolant. And it's gonna be splashing out and about like that because of the air coming out. But if you just did the timing belt, you should be good with just one jug. But on this car, I also drained the radiator, so we're definitely gonna need more than one jug. And there we go. Once you get most of the air out, obviously we haven't run it yet, you'll see something like that. Now we just raised the level of the highest point of the coolant. because sometimes the radiator cap isn't, so this thing helps with that. But now we just have to get it started and let it run. So now let's go inside. Alright, now that we're in here, we're gonna want to turn the heat on. Turn the AC off, turn it up all the way. And I like to turn it up all the way with the heat on low, because on these V6s, it seems that it can get the job done with the coolant just at idle, no revving needed, and putting on the lowest heat makes that process faster. Alright guys, I just wanted to show you what revving it would do. So let's go up to like 3,000. Sometimes you do have to give it that love in order to get some air bubbles out. Alright, now that we got that done, we have this little plunger thing. You're going to want to insert it in and then twist off and lift. And then put your cap back on as soon as you can to prevent as much mess as possible. Okay, now we have this excess. We're going to put this in the reservoir. When you're pulling the plunger out, it's good to twist it first. Sometimes that'll allow it to break easy. Okay, and then just lift up slowly. And after a big job like this, like if you're draining the radiator or doing time belt, I like to fill the coolant slightly above the max, not too far, because the fluid in here will replace any air that's in the system, as long as it's not a massive bubble that'll prevent it from flowing. And then I just put the excess back in my coolant jug. Now of course you're going to want to clean up any spillage you have as best as you can. Now let's get these plastic covers back on. We'll put this one on first. This one goes on the back here. Now let's get this big piece that goes over the radiator. And then this piece that goes in the top right corner. Now the left side of the engine bay. And that's how you perform a coolant service. But alright guys, that's it for part one. I hope you guys learned something new, something valuable. Maybe you realized how easy some of these services are. Some of them are a bit more complicated and require more things, like the brake bleed and the clutch bleed. You know, this could be your guys' opportunity to try something new on your car and save yourself some money by not having to pay someone to do it for you. Or maybe you realized, wow, I don't want to touch that at all. I'll just leave it to a professional. Regardless, I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you guys stay tuned for part two. But alright guys, that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great day.